The Central African Republic is a presidential republic. Faustin Archange Touadera was elected president for a second five-year term in 2020 in a process marred by violence. During elections, 6 armed groups combined to form a new alliance, the Coalition of Patriots for Change, led by former President François Bozizé, exited ongoing peace negotiations, and called for a suspension of voting while turning to violence to stop the electoral process. As a result, only an estimated 35% of registered voters cast ballots. As a result of this insecurity, President Touadera called for international security assistance from all partners, including the Russian Federation government, which facilitated the deployment of Wagner Group forces. President Touadera also appealed to the Rwandan government, which deployed regular army units. Civil society and political opposition leaders denounced election irregularities, while international observers noted that widespread violence prevented large numbers of citizens from participating and called on all parties to settle differences peacefully and inclusively. The Central African Armed Forces report to the Ministry of Defense and maintain internal security. Members of the Wagner Group supplemented Central African Armed Forces security operations and provided close protection services to the president with armed personnel originating from Russia and Russian allied nations. Police and gendarmes hold responsibility for maintaining law and order and report to the Ministry of Interior charged with public security. The president is commander-in-chief of all armed forces. Civilian authority over security forces improved but remained weak. There were reports that members of the security forces committed numerous abuses. Significant human rights issues included credible reports of unlawful or arbitrary killings, including extrajudicial killings, torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment by the government and on behalf of the government, harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, arbitrary arrest or detention, serious abuses in a conflict, including reportedly unlawful civilian deaths or harm, enforced disappearances or abductions, torture, physical abuses, or punishment, or unlawful recruitment or use of child soldiers by armed groups and the armed forces, restrictions on free expression and media, including the enforcement of or threat to enforce criminal libel laws, substantial interference with the freedom of peaceful assembly, severe or particularly severe restrictions of religious freedom, serious government corruption, serious government restrictions on or harassment of domestic and international human rights, organizations, lack of investigation of and accountability for gender-based violence, including domestic or intimate partner violence, sexual violence, workplace violence, child, early, and forced marriage, female genital mutilation, cutting, femicide, and other forms of gender-based violence, trafficking in persons, laws criminalizing consensual same-sex relationships between adults, and existence of the worst forms of child labor. The government took steps to investigate, prosecute, and punish officials for alleged human rights abuses and corruption, including in the security forces. The government had mechanisms in place to identify and punish officials who committed human rights abuses or engaged in corruption, but a climate of impunity and a lack of access to legal services remained obstacles to citizens' ability to obtain formal justice. Despite some improvements, including through the United Nations peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic activity, state authority beyond Bangui generally remained weak. Armed groups reportedly continued to perpetrate serious abuses of human rights and abuses of international humanitarian law. They reportedly committed unlawful killings, physical abuses and other mistreatment, abductions, sexual assaults, looting, and destruction of property. Note, this report refers to the ex-Seleka as a blanket term for the armed factions of the Coalition of Patriots for Change, the Popular Front for the Renaissance in the Central African Republic, and the Union for Peace, which were formed after the dissolution of the Seleka movement in 2013. The armed groups known as Return, Reclamation, Rehabilitation and the Anti-Balaka also committed serious human rights abuses